I, when I was 18, my family couldn't even be bothered to pick me up from the airport after my first semester of college. I called 12 times. No answer. An hour later, my mom finally texted, "You want attention. Try not being a disappointment." I broke down in tears. And in that moment, I quietly thought, they would pay for what they did, starting today. 3 years later, my mom sent 37 messages. "Please, we were wrong. Come back?" That digital begging felt like a victory, but the war started on a freezing curb at JFK. The December wind at Terminal 4 cut through my thin hoodie, biting at my skin like tiny needles. Around me, other students were swept into warm embraces, parents wrestling suitcases into trunks while laughing about holiday plans. I stood alone by the concrete pillar, my suitcase handle digging into my frozen palm. My phone battery hottered at a critical 10%, glowing faintly in the twilight. Every time I hit redial, the silence on the other end felt heavier. It wasn't a missed connection, it was a deliberate statement. I watched a father wrap his daughter in a bear hug 10 feet away, lifting her off the ground. A sharp pang of jealousy twisted in my gut. I was Gabriella, the reliable one. The daughter who didn't need help, so I never got any. I had spent 4 months studying until my eyes burned. Maintaining a perfect GPA, just to prove I was worth the investment. Standing there, watching my breath fog in the cold air, I realized my grades didn't matter. I was simply invisible. I dialed home one last time, desperation making my fingers clumsy. It rang 4 times before dropping to voicemail. A reject button pressed by a human hand. Then the notification chimed, loud in the lull between cars. I looked down, hoping for an apology or an excuse about traffic. I read those hateful words from my mother about wanting attention. The screen blurred as tears finally spilled over, freezing on my cheeks. She didn't just forget me. She resented that I expected her to care. The battery indicator turned red, dropping to 4%. I had a choice to make in that freezing moment. I could call again and beg, or I could figure it out myself. I wiped my face with my sleeve, the fabric rough against my skin. Opening the rideshare app, I watched the car icon spin, calculating a fare that would eat half my cash. I confirmed the ride just as my phone dimmed. I wasn't going to ask them for anything ever again. I was done. A gray sedan pulled up 5 minutes later. The driver looking annoyed at my hesitation. I hauled my suitcase into the back seat alone, my muscles straining. As we merged onto the highway, leaving the airport lights behind, I felt a strange hardening in my chest. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was a cold, calculating resolve. I didn't know it yet. But that forgotten airport pickup was the prologue to their ruin. They had saved an hour of driving, but they had lost a daughter. The Uber tires crunched over the gravel of our driveway, the sound distinct in the quiet New Jersey cul-de-sac. It was nearly 9 o'clock. But the house was blazing with light, glowing like a lantern against the dark winter sky. Cars lined the street, bumper to bumper, forcing my driver to double park. For a split second, a foolish, warm hope sparked in my chest. Maybe they hadn't forgotten. Maybe the silence was a ruse for a surprise welcome home party. That hope died the moment I dragged my suitcase through the unlocked front door. The heat hit me first, smelling of expensive catering and my mother's perfume. Laughter boomed from the living room, drowning out the sound of the latch clicking shut behind me. I stepped into the foyer and looked up. A gold glitter banner stretched across the archway, catching the chandelier's light. It didn't say, "Welcome home, Gabriella." It spelled out, in massive, shouting letters, "Ichu, Ichuios, Ichen." I stood frozen, my coat dripping melting snow onto the hardwood. My mother, Marilyn, swept into the hallway holding a crystal flute, her face flushed with wine and triumph. She stopped short when she saw me, her smile tightening into a thin, annoyed line. There was no hug. No question about how I got there. "Gabriella, honestly," she hissed, gesturing at my bag. You're blocking the flow of traffic. Move that monstrosity upstairs. This is a big night for your brother. I hauled my luggage up the stairs, the wheels bumping loudly, but no one looked up. From the landing, I watched my father clap Ethan on the back. My brother stood in the center of the room, holding court like a king, wearing a suit that looked brand new. To the future? Dad bellowed, raising his glass high. Marketing coordinator. That is a real job, son. Something we can count on. The room erupted in applause. Cheering for mediocrity. I retreated to my bedroom, closing the door against the noise. The room was freezing. The vent was closed to save heat for the party downstairs. I sat on the edge of my bed, still in my coat, and plugged my dying phone into the wall charger. I needed to pay the Uber driver, but my stomach twisted with a sudden, dark intuition. I opened my banking app, the blue loading circle spinning. When the balance flashed onto the screen, my breath hitched. The $4,000 I had saved from summer waitressing jobs was gone. The balance read $42. I clicked on the transaction history, my fingers trembling. A single transfer, dated 3 days ago, moved everything to a joint account I couldn't access. The label simply read, travel, rage, hot and blinding. Finally melted the ice in my veins. I didn't unpack. I marched back downstairs, weaving through the guests, until I found my mother in the kitchen stacking plates. "Where is my money?" I asked, my voice cutting through the kitchen chatter. Mom didn't even flinch. She handed a dirty plate to a caterer and turned to me with terrifying calm. "Lower your voice," she said smoothly. "We needed it for Ethan's celebratory trip. He's investing in his network, Gabriella. You should be proud to contribute to the family's success instead of hoarding." She patted my cheek, dismissing me. My future was negotiable, Ethan's image was not. I didn't scream. Screaming cost energy I needed for the double shifts I picked up immediately. In Boston, life became a blur of espresso shots and grease burns from the campus diner. While Ethan posted photos of his networking trip in Cabo, I was scraping half-eaten eggs off plates to pay for textbooks. My mother called occasionally, not to check on me, but to critique. "You sound exhausted," she'd say, sipping wine audible in the background. "It's unattractive, Gabriella." I bit my tongue until I tasted copper. The heaviest labor wasn't at the diner, it was on my laptop. Ethan's frantic texts usually arrived around midnight on Tuesdays. "Gabby, I need eyes on this deck. Just a quick polish." His quick polish meant fixing broken layouts, rewriting copy, and designing logos he claimed were his. I wanted to say no, but the conditioning ran deep, a programmed reflex to be useful to avoid being discarded. I fixed his fonts while my chemistry homework sat ignored. He got the promotion. I got a thumbs-up emoji. By junior year, the dynamic had hardened into concrete. I was the shadow architect of Ethan's career, ghostwriting his success from a cramped dorm room. One evening, he FaceTimed me, drunk on corporate praise. "They love the new campaign concept," he slurred, holding up a beer. "Dad says I am a natural." He never mentioned the concept was mine, sketched on a napkin I'd sent him. I stared at his pixelated grin, feeling a hollow ache. They didn't love him. They loved the work I gave him. The exploitation wasn't just professional. It was quietly digital. I was reviewing my bank statement one rainy afternoon, hunting for a discrepancy in my rent check. That's when I saw the recurring charges, small enough to miss if you weren't looking, but deadly in aggregate. Netflix, Spotify Family, Amazon Prime, a premium LinkedIn subscription. They were all linked to the debit card I had on file from high school. I calculated the total sum. I had been paying for their entertainment for 3 years. I sat listening to the rain, staring at the total. $1,200. That was my textbooks for 2 semesters. It was the winter coat I didn't buy. It was the dental appointment I skipped. My mother had stolen my savings for a trip, but she was bleeding me daily for her creature comforts. I almost texted her, my thumb hovering over the send button. But I remembered the airport. If I confronted them now, they would just gaslight me. I needed something stronger than anger. I didn't cancel the subscriptions. Not yet. Instead, I opened a new folder on my laptop, buried deep inside my system files. I named it Receipts. I started screenshotting everything. The bank statements showing the unauthorized charges. The timestamps of Ethan's desperate emails begging for help. The text from Mom criticizing my cheapness while she watched movies on my dime. It felt petty at first. But as the folder filled up, it started to feel like something else. It felt like ammunition. I kept my head down for the rest of senior year. I played the part of the dutiful daughter, responding to texts with polite brevity, and fixing Ethan's slide decks without complaint. They thought I was finally learning my place in the hierarchy. They mistook my silence for submission. I was just waiting for the right moment to pull the plug. Graduation was approaching, the final milestone before I cut the cord. I told myself I was just keeping the peace. But really, I was preparing for war. The night before the ceremony, the silence from my family group chat was deafening. I paced my tiny off-campus bedroom, staring at the black gown hanging from my closet door, like a Grim Reaper's cloak. Finally, I dialed my mother, needing to know logistics for the morning. She answered on the third ring, sounding distracted and annoyed. "Gabriella, I am in the middle of dinner," she sighed. The clinking of silverware audible in the background. "What is it now?" I gripped the phone tighter. "About that," she said, her voice dropping into that fake, sympathetic tone I hated. "Ethan has a massive client meeting tomorrow. It's a career maker, sweetie. He needs the car." I stopped pacing, staring at my reflection in the dark window. "You have 2 cars," I whispered. "Your father's transmission is acting up." She lied smoothly. "We can't risk it. We'll watch the live stream, you understand, right?" Family supports family. She hung up before I could point out that a train ticket cost $40. The next morning, the stadium hummed with a collective roar of joy that made my ears ring. I stood in a sea of black polyester, surrounded by classmates waving frantically at the bleachers. Fathers held up handmade signs with glitter glue, mothers wiped tears with damp tissues. I scanned the scans out of pure muscle memory, searching for a face I knew wasn't there. My stomach twisted into a cold knot. There was no one to wave to. I was an island. "Gabriella Marino," the dean announced, his voice booming over the loudspeakers. I walked across the stage, my heels clicking rhythmically on the wooden planks. I shook the hand of a stranger. Uz smiled for a camera that would sell me an overpriced photo later, and accepted the diploma tube. The applause was polite, the kind strangers give to fill the silence. No one screamed my name. No one stood up. I walked off the other side, clutching the paper that proved I existed. After the ceremony, I retreated to the shade of an old oak tree, away from the happy chaos of family photos. I pulled out my phone, half expecting a guilt-ridden text saying they watched the stream. There was a notification from Mom, sent 3 minutes ago. I opened it, my heart hammering against my ribs. It wasn't a congratulations. It read, "The Netflix isn't working on the television downstairs. Send the password again. Ethan wants to relax after his meeting." I stared at the screen until the pixels blurred. They hadn't watched. They hadn't even thought about me. Except as a tech support hotline for their leisure. Ethan was relaxing after a meeting. I had just graduated summa cum laude, and I was invisible. Something inside me snapped, loud and final like a dry twig. It wasn't rage this time. It was clarity. They didn't miss their daughter. They missed their access. I wasn't a person to them, I was a utility. I didn't reply to the text. Instead, I opened my banking app, sitting right there in the grass in my cap and gown. My fingers moved with surgical precision. Netflix, canceled. Spotify family plan, terminated. Amazon Prime, account closed. Then, the big one. I called the phone carrier and authorized a separation of lines, removing myself from the family plan I had been paying for. "Are you sure?" the agent asked. "I've never been more sure," I said. The line went dead. Back in my apartment, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy with unsaid words and the hum of the refrigerator. I sat on my floor, still wearing my graduation cap, staring at the black mirror of my phone. The receipts folder was open on my laptop, glowing like a toxic waste dump in the dim room. I felt a sudden, frantic need to purge the poison before it consumed me. I propped my phone against a stack of textbooks, hit record on TikTok, and stared into the lens. I didn't script it, I just spoke. "My family forgot me at JFK when I was 18. I started, my voice cracking under the weight of the memory. "Today, they skipped my college graduation because my brother needed the car for a meeting." I held up the screenshot of the text asking for the Netflix password. "This is the only message I got today." I didn't scream or cry. I just listed the facts: the stolen money, the years of invisibility, the digital servitude. It was a 30-second autopsy of my relationship with them. I posted it, captioned it, "The Invisible Child," and collapsed into bed. I woke up to a phone that was vibrating so hard it had walked itself off the nightstand. My screen was a blur of notifications, the numbers climbing faster than I could process. 10,000 views, 50,000, a million. The comments weren't just sympathetic, they were enraged. I thought I was the only one. A user named Glasschild99 wrote, "You just told my life story," said another. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was standing in a stadium of people who knew exactly how cold that airport curb felt. The momentum terrified me, but it also fueled a new, sharp purpose. Within a week, I bought a cheap USB microphone and hung heavy blankets over my windows to dampen the city noise. I launched Left at the Airport, a podcast dedicated to the financial and emotional mechanics of toxic families. I changed names to protect myself, calling my mother the architect, and Ethan the golden boy. I read from my receipts folder, breaking down the math of exploitation. It wasn't just venting. It was forensic accounting of abuse. In episode 3, I detailed the subscription trap, explaining how I had funded their lifestyle for years without credit. I uploaded screenshots of the bank transfers with the personal info redactor. The internet went wild. People started stitching my videos, showing their own canceled family plans and cut credit cards. I received emails from teenagers asking how to open secret bank accounts. I was becoming a guide for the forgotten. My voice, once ignored in my own kitchen, was now echoing in thousands of cars and bedrooms across the country. But the world is smaller than we think, and secrets have a nasty way of leaking. I was editing an episode about the "Congratulations, Ethan" banner when a direct message popped up on Instagram. It was from my cousin, Sophia, a girl I hadn't seen since Christmas 2 years ago. My stomach dropped. "Hey Gabby," the message read. "I just saw a TikTok that sounded exactly like Aunt Marilyn. Is this you?" My anonymity, my shield against their direct wrath, had just developed a hairline fracture. I stared at Sophia's message, my cursor blinking like a warning light. I could lie, block her, or delete everything. But then I remembered the thousands of comments. The community I had built in the ruins of my family. I typed back 2 words. "It is." I hit send before I could panic. I wasn't hiding anymore. If they wanted to find me, let them come. I had the truth on my side, and unlike them, I had receipts. The war had officially moved from the shadows to the light. The first domino fell in a brightly lit Verizon store 3 towns over. According to Sophia, my mother had walked in to upgrade her iPhone, expecting the usual seamless transaction. She handed over her card with that practiced, regal air she used on service workers. But when the clerk ran it, the machine chirped a harsh, rejecting beep. "Insufficient funds," he said. She tried to argue, claiming a bank error, But the truth was simple math. Without my silent deposits covering the family plan, the account was bone dry. Back at the house, the digital blackout hit with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. My father sat down for his Tuesday night crime procedural, only to find the smart television demanding a login he didn't have. He called my name out of habit, then remembered I wasn't there to fix it. He tried to enter his own credit card, but the interface was confusing. For the first time in years, the living room wasn't filled with the distraction of streaming content. It was filled with a heavy, accusing silence. Ethan's collapse was less immediate but far more public. He had grown accustomed to sending me raw, messy data and receiving polished gold in return. 2 weeks after I cut contact, his boss assigned him a solo pitch for a major beverage client. He texted me repeatedly, the messages shifting from casual to frantic. "Just need a quick look, Gabby." Come on. I archived them without reading. He had to walk into that boardroom with nothing but his own mediocre ideas. It was a disaster waiting to happen. The presentation looked like a high school project. Sophia told me later that he used Comic Sans because he couldn't figure out how to import the brand fonts I used to manage. The client was insulted by the lack of effort, and his boss was humiliated. The golden boy lost his shine the moment he had to generate his own light. He wasn't fired, but he was moved to data entry, a basement roll away from clients. His career had been a house of cards built on my labor. The final nail in his professional coffin came from a shared break room. A junior designer at his agency was listening to, left at the airport, during lunch. She heard my story about the stolen logo designs. Designs she recognized from Ethan's portfolio, because they were actually mine. She put the pieces together, matched the timelines, and realized he was a fraud. She didn't confront him directly. She just started whispering. The office rumor mill did the rest, turning him from a rising star into a known plagiarist. While Ethan shrank at work, my mother was shrinking socially. The algorithm pushed my content onto the feeds of local moms in her suburb. She tried to post a vague status about ungrateful children, fishing for sympathy. Instead of likes, she got questions. A neighbor commented, "Is it true about the airport?" "That sounds awful, Marilyn." Another asked about the stolen savings. Her meticulously curated reputation as the perfect mother was dissolving in real time. She deleted the post, but the screenshots lived on in private group chats. In Boston, my reality was inverting. The notoriety from the podcast didn't scare away business, it attracted it. Small business owners, many of them women who had been overlooked themselves, wanted to work with the girl who walked away. I signed 3 branding contracts in a single week. For the first time, I wasn't just paying bills, I was building wealth. I looked at my bank account and saw a number that didn't just mean survival. It meant freedom. I was profiting from the voice they tried to silence. I celebrated by buying a couch. It wasn't a hand-me-down or a curbside find. It was a velvet emerald green sectional that I picked out myself, paid for with my own card, and had delivered to my 4th-floor walk-up. As I sat on it, looking around my apartment, I realized there wasn't a single object here that they had touched or tainted. No gifts with strings attached. No old furniture they expected me to be grateful for. My space was entirely mine, a sanctuary built on severance. Then came the email, bypassing the block I had on their numbers. The subject line was simply, "Family." I opened it against my better judgment. It wasn't an apology. It was a manifesto of victimhood written by my mother. "We are struggling, Gabriella," she wrote. "Your father is stressed. Ethan is depressed. We are doing our best. But things are hard right now. How can you sleep knowing we are suffering?" She listed their hardships like a receipt, expecting me to pick up the tab one last time. I read the email twice, searching for a pang of guilt. I waited for that familiar heavy feeling in my chest, the urge to fix it. But it never came. Instead, I felt a strange, cool detachment. Their struggle wasn't a tragedy, it was just the natural consequence of losing their host. They were parasites angry that the organism had detached. I didn't hit reply. I didn't send money. Simply dragged the email into a folder named Evidence, and went back to designing my life. 3 years after leaving JFK, I woke up to my phone vibrating so violently it sounded like a drill. The screen was a wall of notifications from one contact mom. 37 messages. I scrolled past the initial guilt trips and accusations until I reached the recent ones. They were different. Desperate. Please pick up. We need to talk. I'm in the city. A photo followed. A blurry shot of Bryant Park. She wasn't just texting into the void anymore. She was invading my physical territory. I felt a cold spike of adrenaline. I didn't reply with a heart emoji or a promise. I sent a calendar invite. 11 a.m. The coffee shop on 42nd Street. It was cold, logistical, and entirely on my terms. Riding the subway into Manhattan, I checked my reflection in the dark window. I wasn't the 18-year-old girl crying in a hoodie anymore. I was a business owner with a portfolio and a spine. I treated this like a consultation with a difficult client. I wasn't going to be a daughter today. I was going to be a negotiator. The coffee shop smelled of roasted beans and wet raincoats. I spotted her immediately at a corner table, but she looked like a stranger. Marilyn, who never left the house without full contour, was wearing minimal makeup. Her shoulders were hunched over an untouched lat, her posture deflated. When she saw me, her eyes widened with a mix of hunger and terror. She stood up too fast, knocking her purse over. Gabriella, she breathed, reaching out. I didn't hug her. I sat down and placed my phone face up on the table. She sank back into her chair, her hands trembling around the cup. I've been listening, she whispered, her voice cracking. To the podcast. People sent it to me. She wiped her eyes with a rough napkin. I was angry at first. But then I really listened. The airport. I shouldn't have left you there. And the money. I told myself it was for the family, but I stole from you. Tears spilled over, tracking through her foundation. For a fleeting second, I felt a dangerous tug of sympathy in my chest. I almost reached for her hand. I almost let myself believe she had driven 3 hours just to tell me she was sorry. Then came the turn. She sniffled, straightened her spine. And the vulnerability vanished like smoke. But Gabriella, you have to understand the damage this is doing. Your father's partners are whispering. Ethan lost a client because of the rumors. People look at us like we're monsters. Her eyes hardened. We need to fix the narrative. We need to show them that we're still a family. The air between us turned icy. I have a plan, she said, pulling a notebook from her bag. We can record a video together. Just a short one. You can say we've worked things out, that parents make mistakes but love is stronger. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It would go viral, sweetie. A redemption arc. It would stop the hate comments. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was pitching me a marketing campaign. She wanted to use my platform to clean up the mess she made. I stared at the notebook. The bullet points of her little strategy. The nausea hit me in a wave. Even now, sitting across from the daughter she hadn't seen in years, she was calculating ROI. She didn't miss me, she missed her flawless reputation. She didn't want a relationship, she wanted a press release. You want me to lie? I said, my voice dead flat. You want me to tell my audience that you changed, just so you can go back to brunch without being embarrassed. It's not a lie if we try, she insisted, leaning forward. We can start over. You can come home for Christmas. I'll make the lasagna you like. She was bargaining with pasta and nostalgia, thinking I was still cheap enough to be bought. I picked up my coffee, the ceramic warm against my cold fingers. I am not coming home, I said clearly. And I am certainly not your PR firm. I built my voice telling the truth. I'm not going to destroy it to protect your lie. Her face crumbled, then twisted into the ugly sneer I remembered from my childhood. So that's it? She hissed, keeping her voice low. You're just going to let us drown. After everything we gave you. We put a roof over your head, Gabriella. You owe us. There it was. The transactional nature of her love laid bare on the table. She didn't see a daughter, she saw an investment that had stopped paying dividends. I paid for that roof, I reminded her, with interest. And I'm done. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I didn't look back at the notebook or her shocked, angry face. I placed a $20 bill on the table, enough to cover both our drinks and a generous tip. Goodbye, Marilyn, I said. It was the first time I had called her by her name. I walked out into the biting wind of Bryant Park. I didn't feel sad. I felt light. As if I had finally dropped the last heavy suitcase I'd been carrying since JFK. The train ride back to Boston felt strangely peaceful. I watched the coastline blur past, realizing I hadn't checked my phone once for approval. My mother didn't chase me out of the coffee shop. There was no dramatic scene. Just the dull thud of a heavy door closing forever. I deleted the family group chat somewhere near New Haven. It wasn't an act of anger anymore. It was simply housekeeping. Clearing out corrupted files to make room for the life I was building. Communication didn't stop entirely, but it changed shape. My mother sends emails now. Short updates about the weather or a neighbor's dog. She doesn't ask for money, and she never mentions the podcast. We exist in a polite, frozen da-tente. Like coworkers who share a fridge but not a friendship. The power dynamic has flipped completely. She is careful with her words, terrified that one wrong sentence will end up as a screenshot. She respects me now, not because of love, but because of fear. The consequences for Ethan were quieter but just as permanent. I saw his name pop up on LinkedIn yesterday. He updated his profile to Junior Sales Associate at a local logistics firm. No more? Creative Director? Titles. He is finally working a job where he has to do the work himself. He looked older in his new profile picture, tired in a way filters couldn't hide. I didn't feel a spike of triumph. I just felt relief. The golden boy was finally just a man. My own work has filled the space they left behind. My studio apartment is cluttered with swatches, sketchbooks, and contracts for 3 new clients. I pay my rent days early just because I can. There is deep peace in knowing that every dollar in my account belongs to me. No one is siphoning off my security to fund their vanity. I bought a new winter coat last week, a thick wool one. It cost $300. I didn't feel giddy. I just felt warm. I sat down to record the season finale of the podcast. The red recording light blinked in the corner, a steady heartbeat in the quiet room. I told my listeners about the coffee shop, the refusal, and the power of walking away. Revenge isn't about destroying them, I said into the mic. It's about surviving them. I realized then that I wasn't telling the story of a victim anymore. I was telling the story of a survivor who finally learned to build her own safety. After I hit stop, I closed my laptop and looked out at the Boston skyline. The city lights were bright, reflecting off the Charles River. I thought about the 18-year-old girl standing at JFK with a dying battery. She would have been terrified of this silence, but I loved it. I poured a glass of wine to celebrate. The notifications on my phone were just friends and clients. The only person I needed to make proud was the woman reflected in the glass.